Several months after college graduation, I started an archival internship at the Brethren Historical Library and Archives, housed at the Church of the Brethren denominational offices in Elgin, Illinois. Though I didn't have a car, I could often hitch a ride back to Indiana with senior staff members traveling east. Many of these folks were in their 50s and 60s and had witnessed significant cultural changes in the denomination during their lifetimes, but were aware that Dunker assimilation had moved slower in some parts of the country. Those factors piqued their curiosity about some of my antiquated lifestyle choices. During one of those conversations, a very high-ranking staff member who had grown up on the Western Plains mentioned that attending Sunday afternoon movies had been verboten during her 1930s youth. She wondered if I grew up with that restriction during my Eastern Pennsylvania 1960s childhood. I laughed as I responded that the issue never came up in our household, primarily because we very rarely attended movies, period. By the time I started college, I could count on one hand how many trips to the theater or a drive-in we had taken. Though we had no rule against movies, I suspect my family's habits were influenced by earlier restrictive practices that were highly suspicious of entertainment. Now, one of my dad's younger brothers recalls visits to their very, very traditional maternal grandparents in the 1940s. Grandma Light would tell the Wagner kids, Sunday is a day for full rest. No baseball, no games. Time to sit and visit. Well, even if Sundays weren't nearly that strict during my youth, I do remember when most businesses, even grocery stores and gas stations, were closed Sundays, requiring folks to do a little planning ahead to not run out of supplies on a Sunday. Even so, farm families always had morning and evening chores, and first responders and many healthcare workers often worked full shifts on a Sunday. The story of the bent-over woman is found only in the Gospel according to Luke. The third Gospel is the first part of a 2-volume work by the same author. While the Gospel focuses on the life and teachings of Jesus, the second installment, known as the Acts of the Apostles, records the spread of the Jesus movement. As you may recall from some of my past sermons, each Gospel presents the life and teachings of Jesus of Nazareth from a different perspective. Mark reports him as a man of action. Matthew presents him as the long-awaited Messiah of Israel. John speaks of him as the man from above. Luke presents Jesus as a universal Savior, connecting the life of this Palestinian Jew with the broader context of the Roman Empire. One example of this is the way the author uses the reigns of the emperors Augustus and Tiberius as time signatures in the text. Luke also focuses more on social justice themes in Jesus' teachings than the other Gospels. Now, Luke places the story among the episodes about Jesus and his followers' journey from Galilee to Jerusalem in chapters 9 through 19. This episode will be the very last time Jesus teaches in any synagogue. The story contains elements of Sabbath controversies, healing stories, and possibly even an exorcism. Yet in each case, the story doesn't completely fit those formulas. Exorcism presents the weakest category, though the woman is said to have been bent over due to a spirit of infirmity or weakness, and describes later having been bound by Satan. There's no reference to casting out of a demon or evil spirit in Jesus' action. This is definitely a healing story, since the woman who has lived in a bent-over posture for 18 years finally gains the strength to stand up straight again. Curiously, in this case, Jesus doesn't use typical phrases like be healed, or your faith has made you well, or your sins are forgiven. Rather, he says, woman, you are freed of your infirmity. And I'll look into the language of that in a little bit. In turn, the healing creates a controversy between Jesus and the leader of the synagogue. The controversy about Sabbath observance isn't just about following the letter of the law versus following the spirit of the law. Another way to frame the disagreement concerns that what one is permitted on the Sabbath and what one is obligated to do on the Sabbath. The difference is rooted in two separate rationales for the day of rest written in the Torah. Both readings require members of the community, servants, livestock, and even resident aliens to rest on the seventh day. The synagogue leaders rebuke, there are 6 days on which work ought to be done, and come on those days to be healed, and not on the Sabbath, likely references the Exodus 20 passage. That passage based Sabbath rest on the story in which Yahweh created the cosmos in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Words Jesus uses as he heals the woman and later responds to the synagogue leader's objection, words like freed, untied, loosed, indicate that he is following Deuteronomy 5, which based Sabbath rest on remembering that Yahweh freed them from slavery in Egypt with a mighty hand. Those words also echo the release of debt slaves during the seventh or sabbatical year following 6 years of service. Jesus counters the leader's ought with another ought, as he uses the common rhetorical device of stating a lesser example to make a greater point. In this case, he reminds the audience that if they untie and lead their livestock to water on the Sabbath, how much more a woman, a member of the community, a daughter of Abraham and Sarah, should be loosed and untied from her 18-year bondage on the Sabbath. Her sabbatical freedom was long overdue. Surely those who heard his argument were reminded how humans and animals were included in the day of rest in both Exodus and Deuteronomy texts. Now, Luke may have incorporated a common depiction of the enslaved and free people from the dominant Greco-Roman culture. Most of his audience were either Hellenized Jews or Gentile converts, familiar with the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures, known as the Septuagint, but also with Greco-Roman artwork. They could have been familiar with images of enslaved people as always bent over, while free people were always depicted standing straight. Also, after the destruction of Jerusalem in 73 of the Common Era, Rome circulated coins stamped with the image of a bent-over woman, symbolizing the empire's final subjection of Palestinian Jews. The point was emphasized not only by the person's posture, but by her gender. When we tell a story with a point or a lesson behind it, the point often shapes the way we tell the story. I'm reminded of how my dad often told the story of his paternal grandmother's death. Both my great-grandparents were natives of eastern Pennsylvania, but had lived, farmed, and raised their family on the eastern shore of Maryland. 6 of their 8 children, including my grandpa Wagner, moved back to Pennsylvania as they each reached adulthood. Now, in the fall of 1952, my great-grandparents had driven up to Pennsylvania to attend a friend's funeral. That evening, they joined my grandparents' family for supper. Reflecting on the day, my great-grandmother Wagner commented, you just never know who will be next. A few moments later, she slumped over in her seat at the table. Now, as Dad told the story, It ended there, with no more details. Years later, I was doing work on family history. One of Dad's cousins told me the rest of the story. Great-grandma Wagner was diabetic and not particularly disciplined in taking her insulin. She had had a diabetic seizure at the table, but survived the night and was feeling well enough the next morning that her and great-grandpa were getting ready for the drive back to Maryland. But before they got underway, she had a stroke. She lingered a couple of days before she died. Now, while Dad didn't give the full record of those last days, the abrupt ending of his version of the story made an impressive point about the fragility of life. I suspect Luke crafted his narrative about the bent-over woman to support themes of his larger work, even down to echoing particular words. Seen in that light, the story takes on a metaphoric purpose. Hope, liberation, utopian visions are common in the themes of Luke's work. Think of the lines from Mary's song, commonly called the Magnificat. He has shown strength in his arm. He has scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He has put down the mighty from their thrones and exalted those of low degree. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent empty away. Luke quotes Isaiah in reference to John the Baptist's ministry. Every valley shall be filled, and every mountain and hill shall be brought low, and the crooked shall be made straight, and the rough places smooth, and all flesh shall see the salvation of God. During his inaugural sermon at his hometown synagogue in Nazareth, Jesus reads Isaiah's words, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to captives." Maybe to the microphone too, I don't know. Release to the captives, and the recovering of sight to the blind, and to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. In a way, the first story of Jesus teaching in a synagogue at Nazareth and the final synagogue appearance in today's story serve as bookends. Isaiah's words presented a platform, a manifesto. The healing of the bent-over woman helps incarnate those words, telling the story of healing in the language of liberation. Now, something else unique about this story is it is the only Sabbath controversy with a woman present. Also, also in most healing stories involving a woman, usually the place is in a private domestic scene. And as an example, think about the healing of Peter's mother-in-law. Once her fever is gone, she immediately gets up and is serving her guests. However, the bent-over woman is healed in a very public place where men are clearly in charge. Having some sense of the role of women in first century Roman-occupied Palestine, I'm surprised the synagogue leader wasn't also a bit upset about the focus on this woman. It's interesting to note the movement of this woman from the periphery to center stage. She gathered in the room with the rest of the community. Jesus notices her disability and calls her forward. He releases her from her bondage, heals her, giving her the strength to stand upright. Not only has he freed her, but he has also empowered her within her community. While most of us grew up thinking of a prayerful posture as either kneeling or bowing our heads, standing up and with arms raised was a common stance of prayer in ancient times. It is a frequent motive found in artwork on the tombs in the catacombs. A woman standing upright, raising her arms to heaven. The once bent-over woman is performing public worship. Considering Luke has traditionally been thought of as a companion to the Apostle Paul, I wonder if Luke just had a different opinion about the role of women in the faith community, or have we been misreading Paul's writings all along? Furthermore, in response to the synagogue leader, Jesus identifies the woman as a daughter of Abraham. It is an act of inclusion, much like he will do in a few chapters later when he declares Zacchaeus a son of Abraham. We may not be healthcare workers or healers, yet we can include and empower folks on the margins. Perhaps at times we are the source of disability in our attitudes towards other people that ties them down. Tolstoy is often quoted, "Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself." We can pay attention and discern abilities, skills, and talents, fully valuing the contributions of each and every person in our community. We can better recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every person, regardless of abilities.
Tom, for closing hymn, please stand and body or spirit for hymn number 151, I Wish I Knew How. It's time to extinguish the chalice, and so I'll say we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. I'll invite everybody to the fellowship in the hallway out there, but I'll let you know too that the postlude is a sing-along, and This is Gather Us In, and this is going to be by David and Sue, right? And everybody, yeah, and the words will be up there.
All I knew is actually when I was preparing for this sermon, for some reason as I was stacking firewood, this tune was coming into my head. I could not remember where it came from, and I think it was from the days that I used to attend Mass with Father Legault. I think it's a Catholic song, but anyway, I really liked it for this theme today.
Done, too, thank you. So now, let's greet one another in fellowship as we gather in the social hall for refreshments and conversation. Thank you.